Kitatum Scott Noao, Kakyo Nawago Magantik, Nimi Waitin, go up a mitaguk. Egua Nanaskamau Jesse and Dumiek, Huda Anuts. So I just greet you all as my relatives, and I am pleased to see you all. And I'm appreciating Jesse for the invitation today to present at the Keepers of the Water Legal Summit. So, sorry, as I was putting this together, I'm drawing from the ancestral knowledge of our people. I'm drawing from my relatives, my grandfather, my grandmothers, and all of the people who I was blessed to cross paths with over my lifetime. And let's see if I can click from here. Nope. You can forward it. So I want to say Namagigwe, Nskaten. And that just means I know nothing. All of this knowledge is coming from those people who lived before me and made the pathway. So I'm going to be borrowing their words, and I appreciate the audience today. Nipi pimātisîwin, water is life. So in my presentation today, I want to cover a lot of the knowledge that was shared this morning by Molly Chisasake. She set a really wonderful stage for me to just get right into this. I'm also going to talk about water as traditional ecological knowledge, which is really a term that we're borrowing to speak about what Jesse said earlier. Water has spirit, water has memory, water heals because water is medicine. So I want to also speak about some of the what we call them, hurdles that have been placed before us in relation to our knowledge and what our knowledge means in the Western scientific base, as this is a legal summit. Because in the early colonial period, Western perspectives interpreted indigenous nations through the lens of social Darwinism and perceived us as subhuman and inferior, primitive. These theories of social Darwinism added further justification that indigenous, black, and other brown-skinned peoples were lesser evolved than Western European peoples. And despite the universal value that our ancestral knowledge has, it is seen as having no value. And with what that means under colonial regimes is that everything about us, our government, our social, our economic, religious, education, land, and other institutions are deemed to be inferior, illegitimate, and is to be replaced and has been replaced with foreign institutions deemed to be superior. So through my presentation today, I want to remind us, and you all know this, I'm just going to verbalize it, that our knowledge has allowed our peoples to live here on these lands for many, I want to say, thousands and thousands of years without harm, in a sacred balance and respect. One of the teachings that I gained along the way as a woman, that water has spirit. Water is spirit. And for us women, Cree women, Anishinaabe women, Dene women, women of all Indigenous nations, we are to hold the water and protect the water. And one of the ways that we perform this role is we have been given through the generations songs for the water. So on this slide, I have an Anishinaabe water song, and it's written in the language of the Anishinaabe people. Nibi kisagihigo, kimiyikowisiwininaw, kiskeyitamowin. And what that means is that water is alive. Water has memory. Water knows how you treat it. Water knows you. You can get to know water too. So I'm going to sing that song. In this song, you don't need a drum or a rattle. It's sung to the water. And it's to acknowledge that spirit that is within the water. Nibi kisagihigo, kimiyikowisiwininaw, kiskeyitamowin. And then it's sung 4 times. So within my lifetime, I have placed upon myself the responsibility of learning 4 women's water songs. And through my lifetime, I was able to acquire that. And from this song, I received from a woman in Manitoba, and she is part of the Pimātisîwin Lodge as performing a role of women in relation to the water within that ceremony. And I really acknowledge the beauty that she has imparted to me in providing that song, and I did all the protocols that are necessary to do that. So we can advance. Coming back to our ancestral knowledge, the sacred role of women are that women are carriers of birth, and how my late mother-in-law, Veronica Morin, had expressed it to me is the Creator gave us that extra special something to be able to navigate a human life from the spirit world here into the physical plane. And I'm going to go into a few slides that describe some of that journey that this spirit being is taking as this being is growing within the womb. So women are carriers of birth, and to give thanks for that life, she must take care of the water on earth. Women say that water is the life giver. Life would not continue without the sacred gift. And I'm reminded of a chiefs meeting that I attended in 2014 when Grand Chief at that time, Derek Neepanak, had spoken to the audience about his journey to an island that was just off the coast of South America. And in that place, he and his people were invited. And they pled with him, especially the women, pled with him to help them. Why? Because the industries had polluted their waters on their island, and the extraction companies came in and destroyed the life-giving water that was there. And for that period of time since they had left, the women couldn't give birth. There were no live births in that period, and I think it was about 5 or 6 years. And women couldn't carry a child to full term and that child to live because they had no access to clean water. And this really speaks about the importance of how we must continue to work towards ensuring that we have access to clean water. In the sacred state of pregnancy, and this is a quote from Jim, my Uncle Jim O'Cheese, and he's going to be speaking here tomorrow. He said, there is a connection to the universe, Okisugowak. Okisugowak are spirit beings, and sometimes they can be seen in different forms. That is the wave, and we are part of them as they are part of us. Atsakus and Awasis are related. The baby's soul is Atsakus. So what he's referencing in that statement is the age-old teachings that are placed on the land by the Creator. And this is a picture of the petroglyph that he's referencing. This petroglyph is located in current-day Peterborough, Ontario, at a place called Petroglyph Park. So if you look at the top right-hand side, you see this circle with lines, and then a dark line coming down, and my brother says it looks like a hockey stick. I'm sure you understand what I'm referring to there. But that is the state of the woman who is the other major petroglyph in this picture. She's the one who has that big circle with an inside circle. And then you can see in her body that she is in a pregnant state. She is communing with the grandmothers who are in the spirit world, and they're helping her to develop this child. So there is this straight, strong relationship that a woman who is carrying a child has with the spirit world. And it's through that union that that child is able to come here. But it's 50-50. We must do our part, and we need access to clean water. So you can move. This is my late mother-in-law again, Veronica Morin, her words, where she speaks about the spiritual circle where the grandmothers help us to bring life into this world. All of us, each one of us, were prepared in the same way before we were born. And as women, we have great responsibility. She said 3/4 of the work that needs to be done is done by the women. So one of our roles as well is to take care of the home fire, because the child is loaned to us from the Creator and Mother Earth. And we have to give that child direction and guidance. I actually have water. So this is a quote from Janice Makokis's master's thesis, and she looked at the role of women in governance. And Janice is also going to be a speaker today. You can move it forward. So, our spiritual grandmothers teach us these major teachings as women: humble kindness, interdependence, because we have that 3/4 of the responsibility. We need to work together in order to do that work. All of the glacial waters, the rivers and the lakes, we have a responsibility too, because this is informed, we are informed by the grandmothers in the spirit world. We are the bundle keepers, and we are the ones who help our men and the helpers, the Oskapeo suck. And especially important is the water from Grandmother Moon. So in each of these teachings, we have grandmothers in the spirit world, and I wrote their names there in italics. Kigawino Ski is Mother Earth. Nutugoyotayogan is the legendary grandmother, the leader of all the grandmothers. Iyiniw iskwew, and I'm going to show you where she is located on the land. She is the mountain woman. Kiskeyitamowin, she is the grandmother, the oldest sister of the hunters, the 4 hunters, her brothers. And as the older sister, she understands the role, her role in relation to men, in relation to the laws, because we are the bundle keepers, and many, many other roles and responsibilities, which I can't go into in great detail here. And then iskwew, which is the sky grandmother, the sky woman. And with her, in each of these quadrants, they have 3 helpers, 3 other grandmothers who help them. And I haven't named those. But iskwew is the sky woman, and that's where grandmother sits, grandmother moon. And she has a very important role in relation to the water. As you know, she is the one who regulates all of the oceans, the tides, the rivers, the streams. And she works with these other grandmothers. All of them work together. So as I came to understand these roles of our grandmothers, kiskeyitamowin, for instance, she's the one who sits in the north. All of those little whirlwinds that touch the water, they aerate the water to ensure it doesn't stagnate, to ensure that there's continued life, to ensure it's oxygenated. Not only the rivers, but the lakes and the oceans. And that's forming the tides. Okay, you can flip it. Water has memory. And in this section, I want to talk about traditional ecological knowledge in a little greater depth. With the imposition of liberal ideals of freedom and equality in relation to our knowledge, our knowledge has no protections. All of our knowledge is situated in the public domain, and states possess or own all traditional ecological knowledge, traditional cultural expressions, and genetic resources. And this was granted to them by the World Intellectual Property Organization. So I looked at how Canada is attempting to do this. And I found their website, and it's right there. And the title of that website is The Introduction to Intellectual Property Rights and the Protection of Indigenous Knowledge and Cultural Expressions in Canada. And that was developed in 2018. So one of my colleagues who's no longer with us, Greg Young-Ing, went to WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, and did a presentation in 2010. And he identified the importance of understanding that our knowledge does not belong in the public domain, that our knowledge is not something that can be taken up by the state as having ownership over. He said that existing intellectual property rights, which is IPR, does not protect our knowledge, and that the main problems with traditional ecological knowledge protection in relation to the IPR system are that our expressions of traditional knowledge cannot qualify for protection because they are too old and are therefore supposedly in the public domain, that the author of the material is often not identifiable, and there is thus no rights holder in the usual sense of the term. And the third point he made is that traditional knowledge is owned collectively by Indigenous peoples for cultural claims and not by individuals or corporations for economic claims. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a future slide, so that in the present reality, our knowledge in the public domain is a problem. It's very problematic. And what can we do about it? You can fast forward. So here is the glacier that we know as the Athabasca Glacier today. And that is a picture of it in 1918. It was very robust and healthy. And over time, a road was built over it, the road between Jasper and Banff. And over time, an industry was placed there, a tourism industry, so people could go up the mountain on these snow machines. And over time, the bottom picture is that glacier in 2011, and you can see how much it's melted. And this is the place where that mountain woman I was talking to you about sits. And I'm going to have to come over here and point here. This is her place. Her face is right there, but she is not facing the camera. She's looking in the southwest direction. If you ever go up there, if you get a chance to, look for her face. That is the grandmother who we call iyiniw iskwew. You can advance it. So we need to look at other ways our waters have been encroached upon. In Canada, passed the omnibus legislation, and all of the waterways except, I believe, 3 were left unprotected. And as a result and a response, Idle No More was birthed by 4 women in 2012, and that led to many, many events, as you are aware. I also want to talk a little bit about the drinking water crisis that we currently are in. And up on this slide, I asked my brother is Tony Steinhauer, I asked him to provide to me some comparison of how our water treatment on reserve is in comparison to other Canadians in municipalities. So he said, if you look at the log level of water, log is the cleanliness of water. He said First Nations only have a 2.5 log removal level. And compared to an average Canadian in a city or a town, there is 5.5 log removal level. And those are the bases. So why is ours lower? Why can't we have at least 5.5? He also mentioned to me that the instruments that are used for surgical procedures, they are cleaned by water that has 12 log removal. So that's probably your best, cleanest water, but we don't have access to it. And it's important for what they're using it for, to ensure surgical instruments are clean. And then I asked him about another type of comparison, and so he told me about the color in water. And this color comes from the additives that are put into water when it's treated, like chlorine and other types of chemicals. He said on First Nations, the base is 25 units of color. Compared to an average Canadian access to water, they have 5 units of color. So why is ours so high when being high is not a good thing? So some of the indicators of access to poor drinking water is IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, diabetes, colorectal cancer, Alzheimer's, even suicide, because our mental health state is dependent on water. Remember, water is medicine. Water is healing. If we have no access to that, it can lead to mental health problems. You can advance it. So what do we do about this? What do we do about the reality that Canada has claim to all of our traditional ecological knowledge, genetic resources, and traditional cultural expressions, which includes our languages. I put this slide up to remind ourselves that we have a treaty relationship with the Imperial Crown, which allowed her people to come here and settle on our lands, that we shared the land, that we maintained everything that the Creator gave us within our bundles, our laws, everything. Everything is intact. The day they made treaty, and still today it's there. We have this relationship, which is supposed to be a relationship of sharing the river of life together, each in our own vessel, and that's what those two roads represent. And I'm sure others will talk about this later this afternoon or this tomorrow. But this is actually a petroglyph. And this petroglyph is located on the land which is current-day Manitoba in a place called Little Black River. And on the land, the Creator placed this image, these two roads with those dots and circles, to remind us that we were placed here, that we are made here. We are of the land, and we have a responsibility to the land, to the waters, to everything that was provided to us here on Turtle Island. And that we made this relationship in the spirit of respect, friendship, and peace. Peace, friendship, and respect. And it's supposed to last forever. As long as the sun shines, the waters flow, and the rivers and the grass grows, and as long as we are here as people. So I learned this from my late grandfather, Peter O'Cheese, in 1982. And he always told me that our ancestors were brilliant, and they left for us something very, very strong. And as I carried on in my life, I came to the realization of what that strength of that treaty is. Because the treaty is first. Second is the Crown coming here. And so when the Crown came here and placed and created their government, their corporations and everything, all their people, it's secondary. So in 2015, one of the highest bureaucrats in government, Michael Wernick, was meeting with our chiefs, and he told them, treaties trump Canadian law. He said that 3 times within that meeting. So if the person who became when Justin Trudeau came into office, he moved Michael Wernick from the Indian Affairs at that time, moved him over to the office of the Privy Council as the clerk. He became the head of all of Canada's bureaucracy. And he knows, and he told that chief, everybody in the Prime Minister's office, everybody in the Privy Council knows that treaties trump Canadian law. So let's take this back into what WIPO had to say, or WIPO, that Canada has ownership of our traditional knowledge. Well, according to this, it doesn't. And according to this, we must speak up. We must state with our actions that we were here first, and our laws are pre-existing and continuing, and that we wish to continue to follow the Creator's intention for us as a peoples. You can pass it. We do this for the future 7 generations who are not born yet. And I bring to your awareness, if you're not already aware, that in 2014, the Bolivian women approached the Prime Minister at the time in Bolivia and pleaded for legislation to protect the lands and the waters. And from that legislation came the law of the rights of Mother Earth. And I put two of the URL addresses there, so if people want to look it up. And I had the privilege of meeting the woman who spearheaded that movement. And she was here in Canada as I think she was fleeing her country. Her father sent her to Canada and she grew up here, but she kept her ties with Bolivia. And she went back, and they were successful in ensuring that the rights of Mother Earth were protected within their legislation. Nowhere on earth is there legislation that is similar. You can advance it. So water spirit, the gift to humanity. I had the good fortune of going to Peru a few times, and there I went to a place called Ollantaytambo. And in Ollantaytambo, it's a very old ancient city, and the people there had and developed their own water systems for their whole city. And so I took a few pictures. I have more. It's just incredible that they can take their traditional knowledge that comes from the spirit world, and make it happen within their lives. And so they didn't need licenses. They didn't need an engineer who was a Red Seal or any other of those types of regulated professions to do the work that they did. They used their hands and the philosophy of hard work to create what they have, and it still continues to exist today. So I was really, really incredibly in awe of what the people created there and other places. They were the Incans, and they shared the knowledge of the Mayans. And I learned this story from my other brother, Clifford Cardinal, who said that Grandmother Moon was asked to share the knowledge, her knowledge with us today of how to ensure that our water is pure and our water is clean. And she did share that. And in the time of the ceremony as it was going on, she said, I haven't been asked this for many, many, many years. She said the last time were the Mayans. So the Mayans took the knowledge of Grandmother Moon and put it into action so that they could have access to clean water all the time within their heavily populated city centers. And they were able to do it within a process of harmony with all of nature. They didn't have to destroy anything to make this type of technology happen. So we can learn a lot from that. You can advance it. So when we drink our water, we can ask for blessings on that water for us and for our young ones, our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, those who aren't here yet, to ensure safe passage, good health, because water is medicine. You can advance it. One of the things that I was involved with, and this is through the Indigenous Knowledge Wisdom Center, they funded a project in Treaty 6 that was taken up by Musqueam's Cultural College in collaboration with Yellowhead Tribal College and the University of Blue Quills. And the work that we did was to identify how we can put protections in place for our people's traditional ecological knowledge, traditional cultural expressions, and genetic resources, but particularly our languages. So what we wanted to do was implement the Turtle Lodge Treaty, our way of life, Indigenous education. And it's a document I'm happy to share with you that was created in 2013 by all of the First Nations right across Canada. And we put this work together, or put our minds together at a place called the Turtle Lodge in Saugeen, Manitoba, working with elders, working with knowledge keepers and lodge keepers. It only has 6 articles within it. And the 6th article speaks about ensuring that we have protections in place for all of what the Creator gave to us to live a good life for our children and for our future generations. And so we did this research along those lines. And one of the people we asked to come to speak with us was Dr. Deborah Harry. Dr. Harry has done a considerable amount of work at the United Nations level, speaking on behalf of Indigenous peoples against things like IPR, intellectual property rights. So this picture graphic identifies some of the topics that she shared with us. And really, all of our knowledge goes back to the land, as Molly was saying this morning, and protection is the key. And she warned us against using IPR because that's what the legal systems know. That's what the liberal tenets are about, is intellectual property rights, because everything is commodified. She said if you use that approach, then it's only protected for a number of years. 50 years for copyright, and for patent and other things. You can pass that on to your heir, but eventually it'll go back into the public domain and accessible for everyone. So we cannot use IPR as a means of protecting our knowledge, our languages, and our genetic resources. So she said we need to find a different path. And being that she's from the United States, she had no tangible ideas to provide to us. But being that we're here in Canada and that we have our treaties, the treaties trump Canadian law, we need to put these mechanisms into place to protect everything that was provided to us by our ancestors, to provide protections through our own knowledge of who we are as the original peoples of this land. So you can move it over. And then I want to speak about, maybe if you go back one slide. I want to speak a little bit about what Deborah Harry was saying, is that in contrast to Eurocentric thought, back to the Deborah Harry slide, almost all Indigenous thought asserts that property is a sacred ecological order. One more, yeah. And manifestations of that order should not be treated as commodities. So the cases of non-Indigenous peoples using the IPR system to take ownership over traditional knowledge using copyright, trademark, patents, and the public domain. In many of these cases, this has created a situation where Indigenous peoples cannot legally access their own knowledge. So I think about the example of language. If all of Canada pretty much flung open those doors for all of its institutions, corporations, successors, to just take our language without accessing our free, prior, and informed consent. So take the example of universities that offer our languages. Anything that a corporation such as a university does, they maintain intellectual property rights over that knowledge. Anybody they hire becomes an agent of that institution, and whatever they develop belongs to that institution. These are the kinds of awarenesses we must hold front and center in order to ensure that these things just aren't swooped up and taken. If we do nothing today about this situation, what will our children in the future have in relation to language or traditional ecological knowledge if this is all taken up by Canadian institutions within their legal right to do so, because things like the Indigenous Languages Act was passed in 2019. Things like the WIPO blanket statement that says states own all of this and that we have nothing to say about that. And I just say we must raise our voices, and we must do everything within our power to advocate for our knowledges remain within our collective ownership. Collective ownership is not something that Eurocentric institutions understand, or governments. They only understand individual ownership, and from their commodification or gain for material gains for money. So this is all really, to me, I'm bringing it to your attention if you don't already know, that we cannot use IPR as a means of protecting our knowledge. We have to go back to our own means, and that method and that approach is our treaties. We need to put in place those mechanisms, and we already have mechanisms in place. We have lodge keepers, we have clan mothers, we have all of these institutions that are on our side of that treaty road. And we need to once again empower, because that power has been displaced from those institutions that we ourselves have enjoyed for thousands of years. We need to buff them up. We need to make them credible, and we need to stand by them, because otherwise the alternate is IPR and we'll lose everything. So this is, to me, a big warning, a big statement that we need to believe in ourselves and work together to make that happen. Okay, I can advance. Yep. So I mentioned about Grandmother Moon, about her coming as upon the request of, it was my brother who called on her and asked for permission to use the knowledge for the benefit of our peoples to provide clean drinking water. And Grandmother Moon assented. So she gave them the knowledge and the tools that is needed to treat our water without chemical additions, without any type of other products. It's done solely within the knowledge of our people, by our people's knowledge. And it's free of contamination, free of chemicals, and all heavy metals are taken out. Do you remember the slide where I talked about the 2.5 and the 5 units of, or sorry, 2.5 and 5 log removal levels? Well, their water has a log removal level of 9. There is no color in the water. And it enhances health, curbs waterborne diseases. And through this process, Grandmother Moon communicated to them that she was happy that she was asked this, because she said she is currently bound, so that you know that water has 2 oxygen atoms and 1 hydrogen atom. she expressed to them that she is bound and unable to help her children. And she said, "Unbind me because I want to help my children." So what she was referring to as being bound is that the chemicals that we add to the water through regulated water treatment processes holds those oxygen atoms together so they cannot move freely within the water. In the water that my brothers treat through her knowledge process, those oxygen molecules, they move freely. They move freely, and then you need oxygen throughout your body, and that's the way that we are made. We're 70 to 74% water, and we are electricity, pretty much, conduits. And if we don't have that oxygen flowing in all of our body system, then we can stagnate and we get sick. So I'm very fortunate to have their water treatment plant in my home. And I service, all of my family comes to get water. And one of the things the grandmother Moon told them is, this is a hard road you're going to walk, because only the worthy are going to come to you. Everybody else is going to turn their back. And what that means is we follow the regulations within our First Nations. We must have an engineered approved stamp on all of our water treatment systems. And that stamp comes from engineers and others, scientists, who know nothing about our knowledge, who know nothing about the gifts that we are given by a very loving water spirit. Yet, our own people won't take this up. There's one First Nation in all of Canada to date, Keyikowisiwininaw First Nation in southern Saskatchewan, who has one of their water treatment plants. ISK continues to threaten that community if they don't put chlorine in the water, that they will pull their funding. And that community stands up for themselves and they say, go ahead. We don't want to give up our water. And the Keyikowisiwininaw treatment plant services 5 other First Nations that come for that water. So just want to let you know that within our midst, with our knowledge, we have the solutions. We just need to believe. And we need to remove those regulations that strap our people to bowing to people like ISK that say, if you don't do this, put chlorine in your water, you're not going to get funding. We have to stand up against those types of bullying tactics. We need access to clean drinking water for our future generations, for our own health, because water has spirit, it has memory, it is a medicine, and it heals. So, I think that's the end of my presentation. You can move to the next slide. Kitattamskat na wow. Nimi waitin kawapamitigukakyo nyawagomagantik. And if you want to get in touch with me, I can be reached at iskwew@icloud.com. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. And I'll be here probably till 2 o'clock. And I wish you the best with all your other speakers and a successful conference. Thank you.